Since 1994, the National Institute of Disability Management and Research has worked to improve the livelihood and the quality of life of millions of people around the globe that are affected by ill health and by injuries due to accidents or other reasons, by helping them come back to work as soon as possible. When we created NIDMAR, our goal was to target three main areas of activity. Number one was creating an educational framework that would provide us with practitioners and professionals that could support disabled workers in staying on the job. The second was to create professional standards for those individuals. And the third was to create program standards. But the very launch of our activity was to develop an educational curriculum that had its goal to train individuals in all of the intricacies that are associated with trying to maintain employment for someone who all of a sudden had a serious injury or illness that placed them at risk of losing their job.
One of the things that I like to think has been the case over the years is as we've kind of built NIDMAR and the initiatives that have flown from some of those early collaborations, is that we've built an organization that's founded on solid research, genuinely advancing things after doing a lot of research and a lot of collaboration with others to make sure that we're putting the best practices forward. We didn't hatch the ideas all on our own. We looked at what others were doing and then tried to implement them in, as best we could in our various jurisdictions in Canada.
One of the things about the founding of NIDMAR, just so that one has a sense of what was created, when the group got together to become NIDMAR, we'd learned a lot together. We'd gone to Germany. We had looked at best practices. We had talked to lots and lots of people and their families, and we're so committed that we were going to make a difference. And so in the first meeting, there was some union representatives. I was the employer representative. We had some government representatives, some workers' compensation, the predecessor to WorkSafe BC there, and literally with probably $5,000 or $6,000 in the bank, we sat around and said, for this to be useful, for this to be worthwhile, what would we need to accomplish? And we didn't have a single brick, a single bit of mortar. We didn't have a building. We didn't have an office. We didn't have any of that. A little bit of money in the bank. And we said, for this to be important, we're going to be internationally recognized as a center of excellence for research and pragmatic early return to work. And it literally, people signed up for that all around the table. And that's what it's become.
In today's society, anywhere around the world, once an individual with a disability loses their attachment to the workplace, ends up on Social Security, less than 1% will ever enter the workforce ever again. And that was based on the research that we did. Those were the findings, those were the priorities. So we went about creating a curriculum that allows individuals to focus on the number one goal. You acquire an impairment and you want to stay with that pre-disability employer. You don't want to get pushed onto a benefit plan, whether that's workers' compensation, whether that's short-term disability, whether that's long-term disability. You want to stay engaged. And in order for someone to work through the complexities of what is required of them, that is what drove us to develop a curriculum that was specifically focused on the workplace as someone who could work with the individual with a disability, with the disabled worker, through the maze of challenges so they would stay on the job.
My role as a union representative was, among other things, collective bargaining and various things, but was to first of all, make sure that people who were sick or injured were provided with good benefits. And that tended to be the main focus, was to improve benefits. And while there always was some attention paid to various forms of rehab, it wasn't as much of a priority, I guess, if I can be so bold, as it should have been. It was really about negotiating better benefits for people, longer benefits, a long-term disability that would run basically to cover what was left of your working life, if you want. Part of the problem is, again, we, meaning the big we, both union and management in this example, didn't really put our heads around that. It was almost like as long as, certainly from an employer perspective, and I know this from my interaction with them over the years, is that as long as this cost of taking care of your injured workers, if you want, was a tolerable cost, then it was just a cost of doing business. It sounds crass, but it just was. It's like, some stores say we can have, theft of 7% or something, and that's the cost of doing business, and it wasn't quite that bad, but not far off.
If you look at it from the perspective of the bigger picture, if you got 1.2 million disabled, and let's say over 60% of them are living in poverty, how are they living? Who's paying them? So then they become the burden of the government, because you got to provide them with, be it social assistance, whatever the case may be. So there's a strong case to be made for the government, is that put them back to employment, be it if have to be retrained, whatever the case may be. So to me, it's a no-brainer. And that's why it's so important of what Wolfgang's been able to do in regards to NIDMAR and now the Pacific Coast University. We're going to provide the tools to society to make sure that we have the proper people in place, that we can put forth the factors that we have the ability to reintegrate those people that have been injured. They can get back their pride. They can get back to having pride in who they are, that they have an income and they can still fend for their families.
Yeah, there's a big ripple effect. When an employee is injured, the impact on them as an individual, their families, their friends, their coworkers, and to the organization. Everybody's impacted. And so the more proactive we can be with early intervention and return to work programs to ensure that we support that worker in getting back to work as quickly as possible, it positively impacts everybody within their circle. And it impacts millions of people globally and has billions of dollars of impact on the economies around the world.
The greatest impact of having a dedicated return to work disability management program and all those technical components through education, through certification, through program standards that we contribute both in this country and around the world is the fact that it assists organizations in building a culture of accommodation.
Let me tell you just a quick story. It was in a pulp mill. It was a welder pipe fitter person who had been off the job for more than 2 years, 2 or 3 years, getting full compensation through that whole period of time. What it really came down to, his limitation at that point was he couldn't climb ladders and he couldn't work off a ladder. And he was facing literally a life of never being back at work. And when people actually got to the bare bones of what's in his way, it was more between the ears of the company and others. Like that didn't cost one penny, that accommodation. It wasn't like a multi-million-dollar re-engineer. It was like, that is so reasonable. People have had this wall built up to say, he can't come back because he can't do this and this and this. But nobody had talked to the person. There was no mechanism available to talk. There was no joint team to talk. And so when I look at NIDMAR is a catalyst for the conversation.
Disability management in a unionized environment is critical to have employer and union labor working collaboratively together, or it won't function. And so the two are critical pieces. They each bring a little bit of a different perspective, but with the CDMP, they're speaking a common language. So it's a common language of what legislation is out there, the union, the collective agreement language, human rights language, the obligations of accommodation, return to work, looking at all barriers. And that's where the CDMP looks at workplace barriers, personal barriers, as well as that medical.
I think the relationship between the employer and labor relation is very vital. We need to come to a common language when it comes to disability management, and we need to be working on solutions rather than focusing on position. And by having a CDMP designation, we learn quickly in the sense of how to identify what those common goals are and focusing the conversations and the return to work plans around those. So that's where the collaboration and the relationship building, I think, really can become creative and supportive to the employee when you take that type of approach.
I think the standards that NIDMAR has created, because they were created in conjunction with, again, employers, labor, educators contributing to the development of those standards. And the fact that they're internationally recognized, I think, gives them credibility and gives organizations confidence that the standards are good standards and standards that if they follow them, that will lead to positive outcomes. And more and more there will be increased opportunities for people working in the field of disability management and return to work. Everything from people developing policies and programs to those that are assisting employees with return to work through physiotherapy and other programs that they need to be involved in to help them get back to fully functioning and contributing back at their place of employment.
The professional opportunity for someone who goes through the disability management educational program and professional certification is tremendous. And that's really because so many organizations are moving towards supporting return to work, recognizing that individuals who lose their job will never enter the workforce again. So if you want to work for an employer, a workers' compensation board, a union, or any number of providers, the professional opportunity is tremendous. In 2002, NIDMAR created and hosted the first International Forum on Disability Management in Vancouver, which carried on to countries around the world every 2 years. Maastricht, Brisbane, Berlin, Los Angeles, London, Melbourne, Kuala Lumpur, and in 2018, back in Vancouver, hosted by the Pacific Coast University for Workplace Health Sciences. Going forward, the forum will be in Belgium and Berlin before 2024, when it will become a United Nations Triennial World Congress.
The significance of Pacific Coast University hosting the International Forum on Disability Management is that it's the little engine that could. It is this tiny little jewel of a university on Vancouver Island, and it has been able to attract so many countries, so many academics, so many professionals in this field to come here and participate in a conversation like this. It speaks to the credibility of the university, and this forum, the number of delegates who are here, the richness and the depth of the conversations says everything about it.
Our collective success, whether or not it is establishing the university, establishing a professional network around the world, establishing program standards, has been a function of tremendous champions that have built into this. Champions in government, champions on the employer side, champions on the union side, and workers' compensation and other organizations who believe that we can do much better, that in fact it is not all that complicated, and that there are only 3 C's for effective accommodation: creativity, collaboration, and commitment to better outcomes.